It's the final word, T20 World Cup Daily. Adam Collins and Jeff Lemon for CBUS Super, making your hard work pay off. The game that was played last night between Sri Lanka and New Zealand is the one we'll be dealing with today.
Yeah.
We're in Collingwood. We're back in our, let's call it our Collingwood recording studio. Behind us here is the Town Hall. If you're watching on YouTube, nice place to be. Jeff, to start, tell us about the game in 30 seconds.
Right, New Zealand were cooked early, 3 for 15, and then in comes Glenn Phillips. A little bit of help from Daryl Mitchell. Phillips makes 100, Mitchell makes 22. Nobody else makes more than 11, but somehow they get up to 167, which should be chaseable for Sri Lanka, except they're even worse. They're 4 for 8. Bolt and Southey off the top, ripping through them. Look, Rajapaksa made a few, Dustin Shanaka made a few, but they were pushing manure uphill and got nowhere near it. Bowled out for 102. Big net run rate boost for New Zealand. Happy days.
That's about right. Look, I reckon we're seeing Sri Lanka get to roughly where they probably should be in this cycle. Like, I know there's been a lot said about their progression in the last 12 months. We've made a lot of it too. The World Cup last year, they probably overperformed.
Yep.
But, and I know Jared Kimber's done a lot of work on this. They have fallen off a cliff in the T20 format since winning the World Cup in 2014. It's only been since we've seen Hasaranga playing in the IPL. He's not the only one, but he's been the big one. And now they've got the Lanka Premier League, which is kind of playing catch up a little bit, given most other countries had a high-profile T20 comp, which means that when they come up against New Zealand, who have put together a very experienced lineup over a couple of generations now, with really battle-hardened IPL players and that kind of thing, you'd expect New Zealand to win. The fact that Sri Lanka won the Asia Cup was against the grain.
Right.
And the fact that they won't make the semi-finals is perfectly in keeping with the fact that they are a few years away from being serious competitors.
Yeah, it was an awesome performance in the Asia Cup, and maybe that was that kind of overperformance, you know. But yeah, I mean, the way we saw them perform a couple of times against Australia a few months ago as well was significant. You know, Dustin Shanaka has a lot of magnetism, a lot of charisma. I think he makes that team feel like things are possible, and he makes things possible some of the time, but that can't sustain you all of the time. So I said the other day that they're the new Pakistan, just in terms of complete variability. Like their best is incredible, their worst is awful, and it can be incredible. You have a bowling attack like Hasaranga, Tikshana, Dhananjaya backing them up, a spin attack like that can do wonders, and they started out wonderfully. I mean, Dhananjaya and Tikshana both into the wickets early, you know, pitching it on the stumps, bit of turn, beating the bats of the New Zealand openers, so Conway and Finn Allen, who absolutely annihilated Australia, and they were both out for one. You know, Kane Williamson nicking off. They've got this ability, they've got this talent, but then they've also just got the ability to fall apart completely.
Yeah, and Conway was completely deceived, wasn't he? So he looked completely at sea, and both sides didn't start well, as you say. I think it was 15 for 3, and then it was
4 for 8.
4 for 8 on the other side of the equation.
8 runs, 4 wickets.
You know what we're saying. We're doing our best to balance out the fact that we're doing Australian radio, which would be 4 for 15, and we're obviously doing this podcast in a more conventional way of runs first, wicket second. Anyway, but it's that next tier. So let's use the Glenn Phillips example, right? I was reading some CricViz analysis last night that evidently he's not great against fast bowling. Well, so Sri Lanka completely misread that. They bowled pace off to him and used all their spinners against him. And when that's his best matchup is against spin. So, but who are their quick bowlers that they have to turn to? I mean, obviously Chamira is not available through injury at the moment. They've had Kamara playing, but you know, they lack that. They lack that second serious quick option. They're relying on guys who run their fingers down the seam. They lost Binara Fernando through injury a couple of nights ago as well. He provides a point of difference at 6'7", the left armour. So they're kind of not quite the complete product. So
the other thing that they did is even though they did bowl pace off to him and he likes that sort of bowling, is they dropped him twice. You know, once early he was on maybe 14 or 15, and once when he was in the 40s, and he goes on to make 100. You look at that scorecard; it is absolutely ridiculous. It goes something like 1, 1, 8. 104, 22, 5, 11, 4, something like that.
You're pretty close, yeah.
I mean, you rarely see such a lopsided scorecard. So Glenn Phillips makes 62.5% of the runs in the innings. Daryl Mitchell in their partnership made about a third of the runs. I think they put on 74 together, and he made 22.
That's right, yeah.
And Glenn Phillips is out there while 147 runs are scored through the middle of the innings. But if they hold their catches, so it's not like he comes in and plays a peerless, flawless masterclass of an innings. He gets lucky, he gets dropped twice, and if they'd hung on to him, then they could have bowled New Zealand out for under 100 and chased it. Yeah,
Phillips, impressive player, especially I thought down the ground last night, the fact that he was able to... Yeah, they had long on and long off set quite straight, and he was still finding a way to pierce the gap. It's not easy to do against high quality spin, and it is high quality spin with Tikshana, with the big bag of tricks he's got. I was watching him really closely at Geelong week before last, and when he squeezes it out, it's at pace. Like he's got that carom ball down to the finest of art.
Yep.
And then you've got
Hasaranga
who bowls.
It turns markedly.
It does, and Hasaranga who bowls wrong-uns for days, and
the
rarely has the stumps out of contention.
The one he bowled to Daryl Mitchell was extraordinary.
Yeah.
I mean, it almost looked like Daryl Mitchell had played a leave, like so far away was his bat from the line of the ball. It was nowhere near it. He ends up with the bat above his head. The ball's pitched outside off stump and hit leg stump. Like, absolutely at sea, nowhere near it. So, yeah, that is the kind of skill you're talking about. The thing I was really impressed about with Phillips was the way he went over and through the offside. So he moved around the crease a lot. He was sort of, it was like shooting ducks at the carnival. He was just back and forth. But when he'd make room by moving to the leg side, he'd open up the offside and go up and over cover or up and over point. It's a difficult. You see so many players when they're trying to hit hard, they go leg side.
Yep.
That's the default. That's the default at low levels of cricket, and then even when you get towards the top, particularly with say the lower order and that kind of thing, the instinct is heave to leg, even if it's miles outside off stump. If you've got players who can hit big over the offside, that's such a comparative advantage, and that's what he was able to bring in. So that
he's a 360-degree player.
Well, he was at least a 270-degree player. He wasn't doing a lot to find leg or deep third, but it meant that Sri Lanka didn't know where to put the field to him because he could go either side. He could drag at leg, and he did on occasion, but he went over and through the offside a lot.
Yeah, that point you make there, when you're up against lower order players who only have the leg side at their disposal, you can set your field, you can manage it with four on the rope on the leg side and just having one out like a deep
cover sweeper,
sweeping on the off. But yeah, as you say, he's got the ability to manufacture hitting against the spin too, inside out. He's very good. New Zealand with the ball, Southee gets Nasanka, then Bolt gets Mendes. So they're two, you call them the anchors, and that's being probably a bit unkind to Nasanka, who's quicker than that. But the two guys they can build around in Sri Lanka and Rajapaksa to come, who are more forceful in the way they go about it, Rajapaksa especially. But yeah, they were in all sorts early. I made they both
three
maidens
for
too.
bugger all for Bolt in his first spell. He ends up with 4 for 13 off 4 overs.
Wonderful analysis. I made the point with Bharat when we were on the show when you weren't at Sydney last week and I said this to Tim Southee myself at the press conference. I think a lot of people genuinely had thought he'd retired from T20 cricket. Yeah. In fact, he's got more wickets in the format than anyone.
He's tussling with Shakib because Shakib caught him the other day when Bangladesh were playing, and I think Southee would have levelled again because he only took 1, but 1 for 12.
1 for 12 from 4. And
how do you do that in a T20 international?
Yeah, so collectively 8 overs they've taken 5 for 25. I mean, no matter what form of the game you're playing, that's a superb analysis going at just on 3 and over between the pair of them. So that I said it before, but all that experience in those two bowlers. We're quick to write off New Zealand because they look a bit samey, but they're sticking with their formula and it's working for them. And I genuinely think they've got two
also
spinners.
Made so many World Cup finals. They've made 3 out of the last 4 across formats
with these guys,
plus winning the World Test Championship.
Who have been in this side consistently throughout. And then look at Santner and Sodhi. They probably don't present as an intimidating spin duo, but Santner has now been running around for 7 years and is ever so consistent with the white ball and has variation too. And Sodhi's 4th on the all-time T20 international wicket taker list with about 80 odd. So
is he?
Yeah, so Sodhi,
things I didn't know.
You needn't be underrated. He's not going to be as compelling as the leg breakers who bowl these fabulous wrong-uns and hit the stumps all the time, although he has got a good wrong-un. We saw that with Maxwell, it was more a top spinner, but the one that does hold this line. He
Pretty
has
much
more prodigious.
He bowls is a top spinner.
Well, I think Sodhi's got that prodigious leg spin as well. That's his, that's something that Zampa doesn't really do, right? So, you combine the experience of Bolt and Southee, the wicket-taking ability of Santner and Sodhi, and suddenly, and the net run rate, which I haven't even looked at yet, but it must be massive where they're up to now. They're not going to be caught. Maybe we should segue to that, Jeff, because we kind of went through the scenarios on Friday after the rained-out game at the G between Australia and England that we could end up in the situation, if New Zealand beat Sri Lanka, as they duly have, where New Zealand, England and Australia all end up having effectively lost 1.5 games.
Right.
Because they've all lost half a game.
They've all had a washout.
So if England do the business against New Zealand on Tuesday night at the Gabba, then all 3 sides will be level. It'll all come down to net run rate. In all probability, now it'll come down to net run rate between Australia and England because New Zealand's net run rate is absolutely away. No one's catching them.
So weirdly, it hasn't gone up. It's plus 3.8 where they were plus 4.5 yesterday. But
right, it's come down because they didn't win quite so convincingly.
But it's more entrenched because that's now spread across 2 games, which means that it will. So for every extra game you play, the less your net run rate is variable by the result of the following games.
Yeah. So So if you think of it this way, Australia now, when they play Ireland,
it's still huge, and they've entrenched a huge one.
Well, Australia needs to create a situation where they have to eat up so much net run rate against Ireland and probably against Afghanistan as well. But they can't afford to. They can't afford just to win those games. No. And in a way, there'll be a clarity of purpose there for Australia. Sure. They'll have seen last night's result and New Zealand bowling out a side again, having that net run rate consolidated, as you point out. They'll need to bowl first and knock over Ireland in 15 overs, whatever it is, and they'll need to make the runs in 9. It'll be that kind of. We'll be watching the game, but there'll be the meta narrative, if you like.
Or they'll need to make 240 and bowl them out for 102.
Yeah, I guess the point is that we will all know that. Australia will know that going into it.
Yeah.
Then it's an absolute blockbuster on Tuesday, because if New Zealand win, England are gone.
Yeah.
And their net run rate won't be a factor for Australia anyway. All they need to do from that point is win their remaining 2 group games.
And England will have Sri Lanka, and Sri Lanka will be smarting after this result. I mean, it's humiliating to end up 4 for 8, to collapse in that sort of fashion. So they might bounce back. We don't know, because we've seen. I mean, the way Sri Lanka came at Australia in Perth the other night was compelling. Yeah. It was brilliant cricket right up until the point that Marcus Stoinis just became unstoppable. So they've got that ability. They could take down a side like England if they get things right on their day. And it's not like we've seen a very convincing England side as yet.
Yeah, at least England will know what they need to do by that stage of the competition, because that'll be after the New Zealand game and after Australia have played Ireland and Afghanistan. So it's really, the focus of attention will be there on the final day of Group 1. Jeff, let's move on to the final word. Hall of Fame, thanks to CBUS Super, making your hard work pay off. They have been fabulous supporters of our show over a number of years. They have been great supporters of their members, going all the way back to 1984. It's by members for members and all the rest of it. They don't.
That's right. No shareholders who want your money. CBUS just want you to have as much of your money as you can have.
And their returns reflect that 8.8% on average across the 38 years they've been in operation, which is quite the figure when you think about your retirement savings and that return on your investment as you're putting it in week to week. That's a big boost. And of course, past performance is no reliable indicator of future performance. So goes the rider. But that's a big sample size.
That is. So the Hall of Fame.
And get your super sorted out, by the way. CBUSSuper.com.au. It couldn't be easier. Jump on the website, expression of interest that you want to get your super sorted, and they'll do it for you. They're incredibly useful in that sense. Like, they've got teams of people who can go through all of your old statements and the shambles that is probably your life, like it was mine and almost certainly is yours, and they'll sort that all out for you. Tell them we sent you. CBUSSuper.com.au.
The Hall of Fame, I think there's only one viable entry, and that is the fact that in the last over, Glenn Phillips decided that he didn't want to be run out at the non-striker's end, but he did want to belt through if Mitchell Santner, missed the ball and there was a bye to be taken or something like that. So he got down in the blocks like an Olympic sprinter.
What are your legs?
Laid his bat behind Steel Springs.
What are they going to do? They're going to hurl me down the track.
Well, he ended up a little better than old mate at the end of Peter Weir's Gallipoli. But, he had the bat lying behind him in the crease, and he was waiting until he saw the bowler next to him, and then he took off out of the blocks.
Like a leopard.
In the end, Santner hit that ball for 4, but by the time it had reached the boundary, Phillips was down the other end. Now, I don't know if that's faster than, say, walking in with the bowler, because as you would know, if you've operated an automobile at some point, if you're coming up to a red light and you're rolling in at 5 k's an hour, you're going to take off a lot faster than the stationary car next to you.
I think this is the future. No, I genuinely think. Well, look, if a couple of things here, right? First of all, he is safeguarding against being run out at the non-striker's end. So massive tick. I mean, this is going to have to be the way. I appreciate that Kohli does it really well too. He gets down quite low, but getting down in a sprinter's crouch, that actually makes a lot of sense. We've kind of joked about it before, but if you can get used to it, conditioned to getting down low. I know it's a lot of batting equipment and protective equipment on you, but if you can find a way of being comfortable and low and explode out the minute the ball's released when you need to get every possible advantage in a short form game of cricket, more of it, I say, someone will take it further, I'm sure, and maybe they'll set up a set of blocks down. Well, they'll be digging in as they used to do before they had blocks. They dig in to take off, and that'll be down the non-strikers end, getting the holes there.
I saw some clips from the first season of the IPL, maybe, of Shane Warne at the non-striker's end jogging in with the bowler, like jogging next. So I think if you're starting far enough back and you're still in your ground by the time the ball's delivered and you're moving, I think you'll be going faster as you start than if you're.
But the risk there is that you can't stop your momentum potentially. I would have thought that if you're jogging in and the bowler within their rights to do so, holds the ball aloft and takes the bails, then you have a chance of being overbalanced, right?
Well, you've just got to be enough behind them. You're like a foot behind them or whatever it is, so that you know that they've bowled, but you're already on the move. So it'd be interesting if somebody wants to do the analysis of the potential speed variation between the moving start and the Glenn Phillips block start. Great, but what we liked most of all was Glenn Phillips' commitment to respecting, not leaving his crease early. Not like Colin Ackerman, not like, who was it the other night? Who was
Mohammed Wasim Jr.
Mohammed Wasim Jr., who had the 6-yard head start.
Yeah, I think Glenn Phillips is very, very quickly becoming a final word favourite as well. He's got that energy about him. The way he is in the field, we saw last week against Australia. So more power to him. Jeff, there are 3 games today, triple header. It's a big one between Zimbabwe and Bangladesh. If Zimbabwe win there, as we said the other night, they've got a really good chance of making the semi-finals. We have the Netherlands taking on Pakistan. Neither side have won a game in the Super 12s as yet. And then another huge game in Group 2 between India and South Africa. It's a bigger game for South Africa.
Yep.
India will obviously want to win it, but they're yet to lose a game, and they're in a really good place to qualify regardless. South Africa, on the other hand, they lost half a game against Zimbabwe, and who knows what the weather will do this week. So over in Perth, that will be huge.
Well, the forecast in Adelaide's pretty ropey as well, I'll tell you that. So
it's following us. Beautiful day for cricket in Melbourne today.
Lovely day. So we're doing 3 shows today. This is the daily show for yesterday. Then we'll do the first 2 games at a civilised time.
That'll be you and me,
and then we'll do the late game that finishes at 2 a.m. our time.
And that'll be Jeff and Barat when I'm asleep. So I'm flying at 6 in the morning tomorrow to Brisbane, and so on it goes. This has been the Final Word Daily, day 14. And we'll do it all again 2 more times today. All thanks to CBUS, cbussuper.com.au, making your hard work pay off.
Arrivederci.